you were in Silicon Valley at that point in time when things were buzzing and technology was being built. So how was it like? How was your day-to-day stories were looking like? Because you saw those days when the technology was being built brick by brick. So if you could just walk me through that time.
Yeah, so now part of what I enjoyed during my PhD program was, learning new things, understanding complex stuff. And I think that is the time when the internet was kind of starting to, be something. In fact, my first job right after my PhD was at McKinsey, and my manager there, his name was Evan Thornley, on my first project actually. He and I used to discuss a lot of times about what you could do with this thing called internet. And in fact, he went ahead and started a company, actually a search engine,
Okay.
called LookSmart. And he and I discussed so many times about me coming and joining him, but I just wasn't ready to take that risk at that time.
Hmm.
So this idea of starting a company, doing a startup was already there in my mind, but I also had this thing that, I want to learn about business. At that time, I didn't know much about business, so I don't want to do a startup without really understanding the business world. So I spent 4 years at McKinsey, and then I moved from Chicago. That's where I was at McKinsey to the Silicon Valley area, and joined a startup there,
Hmm.
and went through the crazy times that were happening at that time, the dot-com boom,
Hmm.
which I do think was super crazy compared to what even you see today.
Okay.
And so the startup did very well. We went through the boom, and then of course we got the taste of the bust, as well
Hmm.
as suddenly, I think in about 2000, April 2000 or so, when our company was actually ready to go public,
Okay.
everything started shutting down. All of our customers were going away. It was a fairly scary period at that time, and that is when I
Hmm.
um, left this company called Personify, which startup that I was at, and decided that maybe we'll start Absolute Data.
That was probably the time after a couple of years when this Gary Kasparov versus the Deep Blue thing happened, right? 96, 97, and after
Around
3, 4 years of that. So AI was in infancy, very early days. People were excited that something is happening, computers are beating humans, and this was such a big news. I was like 13, 14. I was in my teens that time, and it would come on newspaper that something like this has happened and computers are taking over. Pretty much same what we hear today, right? AI is taking over and it will do this and that. But there was a long period of kind of the initial stage of technology before it actually became mainstream, right? So you started Absoluta probably around 2001, right?
That's
So
right.
so what was going in your mind, that how did you figure out that this is the space to be in for next few decades?
Yeah, so when we started Absolute, I actually had a fairly good amount of time to do some introspection, thinking, because I was with Personify, and things
Mm.
were as I said, things were kind of going crazy. It looked like the company which was actually, by the way, valued about 1.8 billion at one point in time,
That
is
time.
not going to make it. So all of that was happening. So that gave me enough time to think through. So, and one of the things that I realized at that time is that I want to be in a space where I know something, where I am bringing something from a knowledge perspective, because that is what I really enjoy. That is where I think I can add value. So, and also at McKinsey, I had already seen the power of data,
Mm.
because a lot of the work that we did, at least the part that I was involved in, the value was coming from the data that we were bringing, and then of course the thinking that we brought on top of that as well. But without data, we would not have been able to do that. In fact, at many of the clients, I would notice that what value we did was we would bring data from two different parts of the company, put them together, and then present some insights and outcomes out of that. And usually the CEO and the chairman would be, we never knew this could be done, and all of those kind of things. So I think it was that learning that I had, combined with what I really knew how to do well, that resulted in us deciding, let's build Absolute Data with analytics at that time, and market research being the other piece where there was a lot of survey data that was used at that time. So those two things, let's bring together in Absolute Data as we start the company.
So basically, I was just reading one of the Shah Rukh Khan interviews, And he says that when you are doing it, you probably don't realize, but when you look back, things start falling in place. So this is probably the time when your engineering plus economics is coming together and kind of creating something very different, which was new at that point in time, right? The
Yes.
analytics part of it.
It was very new. Yeah, most of the companies were not doing a lot of analytics. Even companies that were doing analytics were relatively narrow in terms of the areas that it impacted. And it was a little bit more focused on more strategic and big decisions rather than your day-to-day decisions, because it was expensive and it took time to do it. So the bigger decisions where a lot of analytics were getting used at that particular time. And this is also time when, Amazon, Google, the internet changed the whole interaction so that you could actually collect a lot of data. At that time, there was not a whole lot of. I think the biggest database at that time that existed was probably in the consumer space, used to be the retail stores, because they would have a lot of purchase data. And I think Nielsen was another company which would combine data from a lot of different grocery stores, particularly. So they used to have these huge databases. But rest of the organizations, if you went to rest of the companies, nobody had much data. So the Google, Amazons then suddenly started this data revolution and the technology revolution, which is what the outcomes of what we see today.